Alright guys, Inertia Training here, and today I'm going to answer my first subscriber question. So the question relates to what warm-up exercises and stretches do I use before squatting. Before I start though, a quick disclaimer. I just want to say that nothing I say in this video is a complete or a definitive list of what you should be doing before exercise. This is my personal routine that I use, and it differs every single day. When I go to the gym, I'll feel tight in certain areas on some days and not on other days. I focus on my own weak points and stuff like that. So you'll need to do some experimentation by yourself and figure out what works for you, what you need to be doing, and just play around with it. You know, explore the longer you do this, the more you'll learn about your own body. So keep that in mind. Before we get to the main part of the video, there are three main things that I use in my routine before I get to exercises. And those are foam rolling, static stretching, and dynamic stretching. Now I know some of you are going to be a little bit skeptical about the static stretching part, because most things nowadays tell you not to static stretch before exercise, and for the most part that is true. You don't want to be doing that because it will weaken your muscles and make it more likely for you to become injured. But there are certain ways that static stretches can still be used effectively, especially in beginners. So for beginners, you need to learn the movement pattern of an exercise before you start adding a lot of weight to the bar. So static stretching is perfect to get you nice and loose, to be able to move through the movement correctly before you worry about how strong you are. It can also be used in areas that won't particularly be used to a great extent in an exercise, like your ankles for instance. Your calves may be tight, which will hinder your squatting ability, and stretching those out won't really affect your squat to a great extent. You won't really get injured by stretching your ankles out statically before squatting. So that's one of the things that I do. I think wrists is another. If you're going to be doing cleans and stuff like that, you're going to need to be able to have a good rack position, which will require good forearm and wrist mobility. So that's another reason to use static stretches. But yeah, basically I do agree that the majority of your routine should be made of dynamic stretching. So without further ado, let's get to the video. So here you can see I'm foam rolling, in particular my piriformis here. So this is a muscle that gets extremely tight if you're sitting a lot, if you do a lot of running. You should be foam rolling your piriformis. I mean, I do this every day, regardless of whether it's before a lower or an upper body day. I always roll my piriformis out. So basically just copy what I'm doing here, put one of your ankles up on your knee and roll your glute out, and you should feel a lot of tightness and probably a lot of pain if you've never done it before. So here I like to roll out my hips a little bit. So in particular I get a lot of tightness between the top of my femur and the top of my hip. There's a lot of tissue there which I find gets really painful if I don't roll it out frequently. So I'm doing that here. Another thing to say about foam rolling as well is that it mimics deep tissue massage. So it really is good for any sticking points that you may have in your flexibility. So experiment with it. Unfortunately, you're going to have to find the places where it hurts the most, because that's where it's going to be most effective. So here, this isn't really deep tissue stuff here. This is, I'm opening up my thoracic spine here, because that will really help you in staying upright in your squat. You can also foam roll your lats if they're tight, which I'm doing a quick demonstration of here. And another thing to remember is that this is just for video purposes. If you're going to be foam rolling, you need to be spending a lot more time doing it than this. You need to probably spend at least 2 minutes on every single part that you're going to be foam rolling, and it needs to be slow. You need to find the places where it hurts the most and stay on them, really put pressure on them, rather than just rolling over them like you're seeing here. You can also do your hamstrings. I find the same thing with calves, is that it's very hard to get enough pressure on them. So here I'm doing some static stretching. Like I mentioned earlier, I think calves and ankles are completely okay to static stretch before exercise, because generally they won't be used to a great extent. So here I'm standing on a step with the ball of my foot and pushing my heel down to try and get as much of a stretch as I can. You can also do these in a bent knee position by putting your foot out behind you and leaning against the wall. So here's one I don't really do very often anymore because I'm quite happy with my thoracic extension. But if you struggle in this area, this is a good stretch for you to do. So finally we've got onto the dynamic stretching portion of my mobility routine. So here I'm just working on some ankle mobility a little bit in a bent knee position, which is good because obviously squatting, the majority of your ankle flexibility will need to be in a bent knee position. Here I'm using some straight leg deadlifts to loosen up my hamstrings a bit. I think this is a great exercise to use. Prioritise your spine, keep it nice and neutral, and really feel that stretch in your hamstrings as you go down. So here we've got some leg swings. I'd like to say that I'm not someone you should copy when it comes to leg swings. They really highlight my flexibility issues. You should be keeping your knee or your leg really more straight than I'm doing. Try and not to flare your knee out like you're seeing in these lateral swings. Basically just don't copy what I'm doing here. I'm useless at these, but these are really great for opening yourself up, so definitely give these a try. I really like these. It's basically a lazy lunge because I can't be bothered to stand up in between every single one. They open your hip flexors up really well, which is probably somewhere where most people are going to be tight in their squat. I do them with a bit of a twist to emphasize the stretch further, so twist away from the stretch and you should feel it a lot more. Here is another thing I love. If you have a resistance band or something light that you can use, these will really open up your delts, which is just perfect. And here's one that might surprise you. I mean, you're going to ask yourself, why am I telling you to overhead press before you squat? But basically, having a proper overhead press will involve a lot of delt and thoracic spine flexibility, which you will need in squatting to stay upright. And basically here I'm using overhead squats to kind of test my mobility. I feel like if I can do an overhead squat with good form and not feel tight in certain areas, then I'm ready to squat properly. So here's just a couple more dynamic stretches that I use occasionally if I feel like I need a couple more. I probably should be doing more of these, especially the Cossack squat, because my lateral hip mobility sucks. So this is something that I should be implementing more, and you may want to try out as well. So that concludes my mobility routine that I use mostly before my lower body days. I do some different things on my upper body days, but this is predominantly about squatting today. So leave me a comment if you think there's anything that should have been included in this video. Let me know what you personally use in your routine. And I'm going to put a couple of links in the description of other things that you should look at as well.